Welcome to the Whole Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you become a fat burner, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hey guys, it's Debbie Potts. I'm doing a new podcast interview with a new friend, Simon Ward, who is over across the pond, a long way over in the UK. And I was on his show a couple times talking about Life is Not a Race, my personal story that you can also read all about. That's on Amazon. And I'm on a mission now to talk about my story more often to help other athletes prevent going through the fatigue and burnout and breakdown that I've had happen to me. And Simon was nice to let me share my story to his listeners. And I really wanted him to come on my show to share his story and his why and how he trains athletes, as he's the founder of the triathloncoach.com, the SWAT, SWAT Inner Circle, and the High Performance Human podcast. He's been involved with the triathlon industry as an athlete for over 30 years, age group competitor, and 20 years as a coach. He's also a mentor and a senior tutor for the British Triathlon. I'll have to ask about that. He's helped over 1,000 athletes reach the finish line of an iron distance triathlon. And he's also finished a few events himself, including Ironman Hawaii, Norseman Otilio, whatever that one is, and the Marathon Disables. So we've got lots of questions for him. And so let me know your questions as well, as we'll put this on the Facebook page and get your Q&A. So when he comes back on for a follow-up interview, we can dive into more topics as health coaching athletes. And as we go into more holistic method training for athletes, instead of just working on their swim, bike, run workouts, but really how to train the whole athlete from the inside out, we want to work on the recovery and repair. And that includes sleep and managing your stress and what you eat. And as I say, it's not just what you eat, but when you eat and how you eat. And as I focus on being more of a health coach for athletes, my focus is, of course, because my own experience of chronic fatigue, breakdown, and burnout back in 2013, I'm finally focusing on 2020, building up my Debbie Potts coaching online group programs. And that's with our 30-day reset and rebuild program. And then, or actually rebuild first, repair and reset. I said that backwards. Got to rebuild the gut, improve the liver function. Then we work on getting your body systems working in order so we can eat foods that balance our blood sugar out and metabolize our food properly. And then I'm doing more health coaching for athletes of all levels, anyone with chronic stress that just doesn't feel good. If you have unexplained symptoms, a lot of chronic fatigue, slow recovery, you're having joint pain, back pain, just all sorts of weird symptoms, and you can't figure out what's going on, and you're kind of stuck in the cycle of trial and error, trying one doctor, then this naturopath, and no one's really helping you. Well, that's what I'm doing now. I want to be the last person you see to get fixed. So we want to work together as a health detective service I will be doing and working on resolving your metabolic chaos. So I'll talk about that more on the Wednesday episode of this podcast and how I implement functional lab testing to clinically correlate those results with your main health complaints and goals and concerns. So that's Wednesdays. Fridays are going to go into more swim, bike, run, performance training, fueling for events and training and all of that. So let's bring on Simon and talk about his story. Hey guys, I have Simon Ward on the line coming across from far away across the pond. Hi, Simon.
Well, good morning, Debbie. It's your morning, isn't it? It's good afternoon from me. 4:30 in the afternoon here.
Yeah, this is funny because I'm interviewing tonight MitoQ tonight. They're out of New Zealand. So I've got the UK in the
Oh,
morning and New Zealand in the evening. I always forget which time zone is who and the times we can meet. So this works great. Kind of morning for me, get revved up for the day because you're so highly energetic. I saw you at Ironman Hawaii, especially at the finish line. You are Mr. Cheerleader, triathlon coach, and so positive, full of energy. So thanks for coming on my show and sharing that.
well, you know that bit where we met up, Debbie. It was what was it? It must have been about 7:30 in the evening, 7 o'clock, just on a Lee Drive there, the last few hundred meters. So, you know, it's just before everybody gets that last little surge of energy before they see the lights and hear the crowd and hear Mike Riley sort of calling them home. Actually, I'd been up since 4 a.m. helping athletes and volunteering at the swim start. And by that time, I was absolutely exhausted. We sat at the Kona Canoe Club there, having a beer and something to eat with one of the athletes. And I just wanted to go home to bed. And then when we went outside and started cheering, I suddenly got this new lease of life, seeing all those guys come down a Lee Drive. And you know, when they were coming towards us, when everybody started cheering there was guys with the cowbells. You could see everybody's faces light up, couldn't you? And that there's a huge amount of energy out there from the spectators and the athletes.
Yeah, that's my favorite part as an athlete in Ironman Hawaii is that finish line, right? When you come down Bellini and you take that turn and and right when you get down there, it's just chills. And to me, it's like so exciting, but it was funny observing everyone's facial expressions, you know, like, why are you guys smiling? Because they're in pain and it's a, long struggle. And, I felt like I want to make everyone smile. I was a smile police. Don't get through this line until you start smiling, getting excited and realize, oh, the finish line's right there. I'm here. I did it. It's really fun.
Well, that bit when you come down Polana, you get to the bottom of the hill. I mean, at that point there, if you ran straight on, you're only about 100 meters from the finish line, aren't you? You can hear Mike Riley. I think you could probably see the lights through the arcade there. But then you have to sort of almost turn away from the finish line, and it's another mile. And it's in the dark. There's a few spectators there, but then you turn down the hill and you can see it all happening at the bottom.
That reminds me, we'll talk at the end of our show. We're both doing Ironman Canada next year. And that's how Ironman Canada, I remember the last time, and wonder if they'll change that you come down to the finish line and then you have another mile to do. It's like torture when they do that in a race. Like, you think you're there, but you have to go down to the big wheel and then come back.
Yes. Yeah, and you can see everybody finishing, and you wish you were one of them. And then, but then when you've turned and come back down that road, you wish you can see all the other people wishing they were you.
I know. So, anyway, Simon Ward, you are a triathlon coach, and you've been racing a very long time and coaching athletes and making a huge impact in the industry. So, I love to talk to my guests on the show to talk about what is your why, your passion and your purpose, and what drives you as an athlete, but also a coach, and how you're trying to help other people improve their performance and longevity.
Yeah, well, these days I don't so much consider myself as an athlete, Debbie. I mean, I do participate occasionally, and as you mentioned, I'm sort of coming out of Ironman retirement next year to do Ironman Canada. One thing I learned a long time ago is if you're really committed to coaching, it's very difficult to be committed to racing as well. You have to put so much energy into your own training, and if you're away on a training camp or you're away at a race, you've still got athletes who want programs. They want to chat to you about problems. You can't really tell them you're too tired to talk to them because they've got their own issues. So for me now, training is just a part of my daily process. I like getting up early to go to the pool, but there's a social element as well. I like cycling with my friends, and in the last few years we've discovered bicycle touring. Not that we actually ride on bikes with panniers. We have support crew and everything. But last year there was 20 of us cycling through the Dolomites and down into the Italian lakes. So for me now, triathlon's all about adventure and tourism. Hence why I'm going to Penticton. Hence why I like going to Kona every year.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, I started in triathlon in 1987. So that means that this year will be my 33rd year as a triathlete. And I got started because we have a thing over here, charity thing at the end of the year called Children in Need, and as part of the bar where I was working, they wanted people to do something to raise money, and so I sort of put my hand up and said, "Oh, I'll do a triathlon," and that was it. Here we are, 33 years later, and I'm still going. It's become my life and my lifestyle and my main source of income. So it's been a pretty good journey.
I think that's similar to me, that once I started, it just becomes your way of life. And I swim at noon, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and sometimes on Saturdays if I feel like it. And now it's just, I'm not really training for anything since 2013. It becomes just who you are, that this is kind of, I like to wake up and go do this. And I love to bike ride. So similar, then it becomes your routine and what you love to do and what makes you happy. And like my husband says, being on his bike is this happy place, and you just like, God. And I think that's what training and racing, if people are racing, they should enjoy the process too, right? I mean, I think that's more the fun, is we haven't been racing, but the journey is towards a race is just as rewarding as, crossing a finish line.
Yeah, I think sometimes I get saddened when I hear athletes tell me that their race was disappointing. They didn't get the time that they thought they deserved. And that makes me think that they were only focused on that one day. And yet they've been training for, let's say they've entered their Ironman. We've almost got to enter a year in advance now, and then they start maybe with 10 months to go. So there's sort of 10 months, 300 days of training and preparation for that race. There must have been some amazing moments in that. And yet that whole process and journey can be turned into a disaster and a disappointment if they don't get the time they want. And I do try to encourage people like you to enjoy the daily process of feeling like they're getting better, to feel like they're mastering a skill and mastering the process. And if you can actually engage in that and what you're doing each day, that whole journey becomes much more enjoyable, because even if you don't get the time you want, your mastery of those skills has improved massively in that journey you've had from when you started to when you crossed the finish line. And let's face it, look, I've been at this game for 33 years, so it's not like a one and done process where you do the Ironman or the triathlon and you move on. This is about keeping fit and healthy for me now.
It's your job, so you got to like it.
Yeah. So if this race don't go quite as you planned, there's always another one.
Yeah. That's why people get sucked into signing up for another one, right? It's like, oh, I could have done this. I wish I did that. And you just learn from each one. And then you're signing up for another one. But so kind of to start with how you got into coaching, because you were an athlete for so many years. What made you want to become a coach for athletes?
Oh, well, I did my first Ironman, which was Ironman Canada in Penticton. So that was 1995. So next year will mark 25 years since that first Ironman. And I wrote an article for a magazine called Ultra Fit when I came back, bearing in mind that this was I think probably in the very early days of the internet. Not many people nobody had broadband. You used to do that dial-up connection. It was very slow. We'd probably just had email then. So I wrote an article in a magazine, and they said that they would pay me, and I asked if they would allow me to put a little advert at the bottom, to tell people that I could do coaching. I was already working as a personal trainer. I thought I had quite a good understanding of physiology and what it took to train for an event. And so once I'd done the Ironman, but also remember 25 years ago, I think there was only 7 or 8 big Ironman races around the world to qualify for Kona. Not nearly as
200.
Oh yeah, not nearly as huge a sport as it is now. So there weren't, I don't think, any formal triathlon coaches in the UK. I know Joe Friel said that when he was first coaching, the only guy he knew was down in California from Boulder. So he would get on a flight and go meet this guy just so he could speak with somebody else. So I put this little advert out. I started doing some articles for another triathlon magazine that had just started off, and I had a little classified ad in the back and a link to that from the bottom of my article. And slowly people started writing to me, asking me if I could coach them. I'd send out a questionnaire by mail, in an envelope with a stamp. I'd do a stamp addressed envelope so that they didn't have to worry about that aspect, and then they'd send it back and we'd talk on the phone. And so I started coaching people that way. And then there wasn't even any formal coaching qualifications in the UK then, so I was just winging it a bit for the first few years, but it seems to have worked out right in the end.
So as you have grown as an athlete and as a coach, what's kind of your training philosophy for improving performance and longevity?
Well, I mean, you and I both know Paul Larson and Dan Plews, and I like their byline that they use, which is health, longevity, and performance, in that order. And I perhaps didn't fully understand or comprehend or think about the long-term effects. Maybe you don't when you're younger. You think you're indestructible, and when you're 30, you never think you're going to get into your 60s. It seems so far away. What I've realised over the years, and it's become more apparent as I've got into my 50s, is that, and I've started to pick up those little injuries, is that you can't do anything without good health. We've probably all been injured and ill, and we all know how miserable it makes us when we're injured and ill, and particularly if those injuries and illnesses don't allow us to do something. So if we're laid up in bed, if we're in a cast, on our leg, if we've got an arm in a sling and we can't swim, we can't ride a bike, we get miserable, and we wish that we could just do those things, not for performance, but just for pleasure. So I started to change the way I looked at coaching to try and encourage people and coach them and educate them into thinking more about the long term, into thinking more about the health, into thinking more about, this idea that you can train through an injury, that you can sacrifice sleep in order to get in another early morning training session, and educate them on why that was a bad idea and why we need to put our health first, and why we didn't have to get fast for next year, because if we're going to be in this for the long term, it doesn't matter how long it takes us to get fast, as long as we're moving in the right direction all the time.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you train athletes? Do you have them measure their heart rate and work on power meters? How do you train people for their performance?
Well, so I have this thing called the high performance human. So I like to think of, it's not just about them training for their event. If you're married, Debbie, if you spent all your time training for your event and ignoring your husband, then that relationship would sour a little bit, and that would cause friction in the house, and that would mean that you probably didn't sleep as well, you didn't recover as well. So then it would have an impact in your training. So I first start by encouraging them to focus on those things. Can they get balance in their life? How much training can they do and recover properly? How can they make sure they don't compromise on their nutrition? How can they make sure they're getting enough sleep and the right proper sleep? So I in fact, I've just shared an article about sleep cycles today, and understanding what the stages of those sleep cycles are. Mm-hmm. I do use heart rate monitors and power meters, but I've experienced athletes who've been in races when those things have failed to work, and it's almost like they feel like they're naked and they don't have any support. And how am I possibly going to finish this race now that my power meters
broken?
Well, you just do what athletes used to do in the 50s and 60s. You cycle and listen to your body. So I like to encourage them to gain those skills first and understand how it feels to go hard and to go easy, and how it feels when you how you can link your breathing into effort level, and how you can link that feeling of lactic acid buildup in your arms or your shoulders. Mm-hmm. I do encourage them to monitor things like heart rate variability. That's I'm sure that's something you've talked about on some of your podcasts.
Yeah.
And for those athletes who have all the gadgets, I think heart rate variability is a great way of monitoring recovery and adaptation to training. And I think some people would be surprised about what their body's telling them if they monitored that.
But then, sometimes I think there's too much out there. There's too many apps and too many gadgets. And it's like, how come, we don't just learn how to listen, as you're saying, intuitive fueling, training, and performing, and listening to our body. And like what I've talked a lot about, paying attention to those red flags and listen to that, because you can get so obsessed, because most people are type A, AAA personalities are doing triathlons, and it's so easy to get sucked into, there's this app for this, and this is app for helping me sleep, and then to measure my stress, and then to monitor my food. And I just think there's too many apps, and it's like, okay, when is it too much and getting too obsessive?
Well, of course, those apps are great, but they're on your iPad or they're on your phone. And so if you're looking at those before you go to bed, then you're flooding your eyes with all of that blue light, and that's going to impact your sleep. So it's not necessarily the best thing. I mean, if you think about, if you read about the history of running, if you read about the history, I mean, there've been that series with Mark and Dave recently about the 1989thestory.com. Really good, interesting 10-part series on their preparation for that race. I think they were only just starting to experience heart rate monitors with Polar back in those days. There probably wasn't any power meters. So the only way you had really of measuring your performance was either the clock to measure your times in the pool, which Mark and Dave and swimmers of that age would have been familiar with. You had a stopwatch to monitor how long it took you to do a run, but you didn't really have anything giving you splits. And, those guys ran an 8:09 Ironman 30 years ago without any of that gadgetry. Exactly. So if athletes could break world records and win Olympic gold medals back then, why is it so? It's no different now. We're still dealing with the same brain and the same human body.
Yeah.
It's just this whole connectivity thing that we seem to be wedded to now, which is,
It's funny. Did you read T.O.? Because he did such an amazing race, Ironman Hawaii. And he has this whole routine. They have an article on all the kind of biohacking he's doing. I didn't know he was doing all that. I knew he works with Aaron Carson for strength training recovery, but he was doing like the brain.
He uses that Halo. He uses the Halo app.
Halo. Yeah. Just like everything is like, wow. It's a seriously full-time job or more being these professional athletes these days. It's crazy all the stuff they're doing now.
Well, it is for some of them. I mean, I'm living here in Yorkshire. I've known Alistair and Jonathan Brownlee since they started out in triathlon, and I think Alistair and I think they both have more engagement with some gadgets now. I know they've got a relationship with Garmin. They're probably using power meters. They probably use a hypoxic chamber. But in the lead up to winning the first gold medal in London 2012. I don't think Alistair really had that much engagement with many gadgets. Obviously, he had a running coach who would stand on the side with his watch and let him know the splits that they were running to on certain sessions. And he had a coach that was on poolside giving him times and splits and paces. But he didn't ride with a power meter. They just used to go out and ride. I don't think they did any indoor riding at that point. They rode outdoors in all weathers, and some days they'd go hard and some days they'd go easy, and they did it all by feel. And that was only 10 years ago, less than 10 years ago.
So going into nutrition part of training and recovery repair, what's your take on that with your athletes? I know we did the low carb athlete fat adaptive process, and everyone has different viewpoints on, their carbohydrates for athletes and what to eat. What's your kind of philosophy in that area for athletes?
Well, again, it has changed over the last few years. Maybe it was because I turned 50 and I realized that I needed a different approach to my own health. Having grown up in the era when Triathlete magazine and 220 magazine came onto the shelves, and everything was about carbohydrates this and carbohydrates that. If it wasn't 60% of your total intake was carbs, you weren't doing the right stuff. Knowing Paul Larson and Dan Plews, I've definitely changed my outlook. I'm perhaps not quite as extreme as them on the low carb, but I do really see that there is a gratuitous and wanton consumption of carbohydrates by habit, without any thought. I observe this in cyclists that I ride with. If somebody stops for a comfort break by the side of the road, somebody will crack open an energy bar half an hour after we've started and munch it. And I'm wondering why they needed it. They probably had breakfast as well. As soon as we get to the cafe, they order a coffee, probably a cappuccino with lots of cream on the top and chocolate sprinkles and sugar and a large slab of cake. And we had a discussion about this, and one of the guys, quite right, he said, well, it doesn't do me any harm, Wardy. I've got 7% body fat, and so why am I worried? I'm like, well, what about if you could see your blood sugar now or your insulin sensitivity? And I'm not worried about that. Well, I said, well, what about if you became diabetic? I'm not worried about that. So it doesn't even register. And I suppose I am more concerned about that now for my own health and trying to educate athletes on that whole thing. So I suppose my current philosophy will be eat plants, mostly plants, some meat, but make it real food. If it's got stuff, if it's got additives in it that your grandma can't pronounce, that's a good rule for not eating it. The food rules. If it doesn't look like it's in the original state to which you caught it or killed it or picked it or something or grew it, then you probably shouldn't be eating it either.
Did you read that book, Michael Pollan? It was a food rules, tiny little.
Oh, I don't think I did. No,
it was like a long time ago, but it was saying all the same stuff. Like each page had a quote. It was just like that. Don't eat only eat what your great grandmother would eat. And if you can't understand the words and the ingredients, that's something you should not eat. It's funny. So with training yourself, what made you stop racing? What before and now you're making a comeback? What's your kind of personal story with racing, and if it, any fatigue issues and just lack of getting tired of racing, or what's your journey been like?
Yeah, not really fatigue issues. I've had injuries, but nothing serious. I broke my collarbone a few years ago, but I came back from that. My biggest triathlon ambition was to race in Kona. And like most people, I harbored ambitions of qualifying for Kona at a selection race. I realized that the commitment and the time and effort and mental commitment to achieving the times that I needed to were probably a step too far from me. The times have got faster, and I'm just not that quick as an athlete. I think my fastest Ironman's been 10:18, but at that time, athletes were going sort of around 9:15. So I'm an hour short, and in order to make up that hour, I would just have to commit so much more time and energy that I wasn't prepared to do that. So I carried on doing Ironman. I'd done half a dozen WTC events. Then I got a bit bored of those. I started to do other stuff. So I did the Norseman, I did the Inferno in Switzerland, I did Otelo. I did really like those adventures.
I saw that in your bio, and I read that in our intro. What are those ones?
Well, okay, so Norseman is an extreme tri. So now there's an X-Tri, an Extreme Tri World Series now. So there's Patagonia Man, and I think they've got one in Israel and one in Switzerland, and there's the Celt Man in the UK. There's about 9 or 10 of these events now, but Norseman was the original one, and it's a point-to-point race. They take you out on a big car ferry into the middle of the field. It's 5 a.m. You jump into the lock off the ramp of the boat. So you're dropping about 5 meters into dark, cold water, and you swim to the side of the lock or towards the side, and then they've got a bonfire on the beach 2.5 miles away. So you swim down there. There's no buoys out there or anything. You just have some kayakers in front of you and to the side to stop you going into to stop you going out too far into the lock. When you come out, you have to ride. The first 2 hours is climbing to get onto the plateau. You basically ride up and down. There's probably 4,000 meters of climbing. After 180k, you get to the second transition. And then you have about 25k around a lake to a little village called Rjukan. And then from that point, you start this hike up a 10% grade for about 7 or 8 kilometers up the side of this mountain called Gestadtoppen. And then when you get to the top there, you go around the side along the road, and you get to the visitor car park. And at that point, if you're in the top 150 people, they allow you to carry on to the very top of the mountain, which is at 3,000 meters. And that's when you get the black T-shirt. If you're not in the top 150, you're not allowed out of the visitor car park. You have to go back to the other checkpoint, the top of the road, and you get a white T-shirt. So the Norseman it's not so much about the finisher's medal or qualifying for anything. It's about getting the black T-shirt. And so because it's a randomly selected group of people by lottery each year, the times for reaching the top for the average athletes outside of the sort of top pros is roughly the same. So you've got an idea of what times you need to do to get the black T-shirt, and when you get to the 30k mark, you're pretty certain that when you get to 25k mark, you're pretty certain that nobody's going to pass you, because everybody's walking up this 10% grade, and everybody's pretty much walking at the same speed. So as long as you keep walking, your position's fixed. So what I really enjoyed about that was the logistics of having a support crew of what food you needed at each place, or what clothing you needed to wear, being able to do fast changeovers, getting them to take your kit for you up the mountain, and working out times to get the black T-shirt, which I did. And then the other race that I mentioned is called Ötilö, which is in Sweden. It was the forerunner of all of the swim run events. Debbie, just give me a second. Sorry to interrupt you there.
Okay.
So Ötilö, as the Swedish call it, and they'll probably write in and tell you that was the wrong pronunciation, means island. Means island, and till means two, so it's island to island. It was the forerunner of the whole swim run phenomenon that's now taking over the multisport world. And I think it's about 75 kilometers. There's 10 kilometers of swimming stretched over the day, and about 65 kilometers of running. So you basically swim between the islands and you run across them. So you might just be running across rocks and just run for 3 or 4 minutes, and then jump in and swim across the channel, which might be 50 meters, or you might have to swim. I think the longest stretch is about 1,600 meters. So I love doing those events. But then Ironman, they ceased doing the lottery, and they created this legacy program. And all of a sudden I realized that if I got a few more Ironman finishes, I could actually have a chance to go and race in Kona. So I started on this journey to finish off getting my 12. So I did for 3 years, I did 2 a year. And once I'd done my 12th one, I applied. I didn't get in the first year, but they told me that I would definitely get in for 2017. So I entered in 2016. Oh no! So I had to do my Ironman in 2016, and that was when I broke my collarbone at Christmas. So it was a bit of a rush to try and get over that and start swimming again and just be able to finish the race. But I did all that, and then I did my legacy again in 2016. I got accepted for 2017. So that was like the pinnacle of my number one goal on my bucket list. And Ironman Hawaii. So I did that race, and I just wanted to enjoy the whole journey to get there. And I refused to get into any discussions about what time I was going to do. And in fact, being a good Yorkshireman, I wanted to take as much time as possible, so I got maximum value for money for every dollar. And it's not cheap, is it, going to Hawaii?
No.
So I deliberately didn't go as hard as I could have done, so that I wouldn't get into that sort of black mist that you get where you don't really see what's going on around you, and you're just focused on the next pedal and the next step. So I loved it. I loved every minute of the week, of the whole day. I could probably remember every second of that day. I can't even pick out a special moment. Maybe running the time I went into the energy lab, the sun was starting to go down, and you know how it goes down very quickly. Normally, quite a lot of the time in Hawaii, it looks like it's going to be a great sunset, but then you see these clouds on the horizon, and the sun disappears. This one, there were no clouds, and the sun was like a little big orange ball. All the photographers were lining up, looking down that hill to the bottom, and so I've got my screensaver is that big orange ball dropping into the sea, and all these silhouettes of people running in and out there. So that was pretty nice.
I think a lot of people strive to just do that race, and even if it's 17 hours, but just to qualify for Ironman Hawaii and be able to get there and do the race. I wonder how many people are racing to be top in their age group in the world, or how many just want to finish Ironman Hawaii.
Well, there won't be many that are racing to be top in their age group. I would think for a lot of people, the big challenge is getting there, isn't it? It's so difficult these days, and so once I'd done that that race, there was a lot of things that went on in my life before I left. My best friend died a few months before. We went to his funeral. Then almost immediately we went on a holiday that was booked with 6 friends around California in driving Mustangs around California, and then we did some expansion work on our house, and I never got a chance. And then we went to Kona. House was a building site for 3 months. Then we went to Kona, so I never really got time to process all that. And when I did get time to process it in 2018, I didn't have any ambitions to do any triathlons then. I'm looking back on it now, I was probably a little bit depressed and a bit down. And it just felt like I'd got nothing left to prove, and I didn't need to do any more triathlons. So I just kept swimming and cycling. And to be honest, I wasn't even that enthusiastic about doing Ironman Canada when all my friends suggested it. But now that I'm in, for 2020. But now that I'm in, I think I'll probably get more excited. It's a great place.
Well, I think I felt the same. It's just, I just enjoy working out, and I know I'm okay. I got over the first 2 years when I wasn't able to race because my fatigue issues, adrenal exhaustion I had, that I was upset and depressed too for a while. But then you're like, oh, there's so much more to do. This is kind of fun, and I can travel, and I can, go bike riding and do what I want to do versus having a schedule to follow. And it's changing that mindset. When I did decide to register for Ironman Canada next year, because it's in Penticton again, I just thought it'd be really special to race that, as you did. That was your first one, and that was my first one in 2001. And my last full, non-Ironman Hawaii was 2012, and Ironman Canada, the last year they had it. So I just felt compelled to do it too. It's like, oh, it's such a special event, and the town's so much fun to do racing. But it is changing my mindset next year, how to race again and how to, the new me is how I'm going to train, and the mindset is going to have to switch, being not so competitive and just doing it because I love doing it.
Do you think you can do that? Do you think you can make that switch?
Well, I have to, because I'm not able to be as strong as I was running. I hope to improve that, but I've been podcasting a couple episodes on running, and just for me, I think I was talking to someone the other day about getting over that. Like, some people have that all or nothing. If I can't do it well, I'm not going to race at all. If I can't finish top 3 in my age group, I'm not going to race. And I have a friend that, she still races, but she's not winning her age group. She goes, it's just, if you love it and you enjoy the journey, training and racing and crossing that finish line, you just have to get over trying to place the age group and just do it to do it and have fun. And so it is rewiring my brain, and I'm sure other people will have to do this too. And I hate using the age. I don't think that's a reason. It's that aging process. When I'm looking at Ironman Hawaii, there's people that are 80 and they're still kicking butt. So the age card does not work with me. But racing again and just doing it to do it, I think is going to be harder, and not overtraining and listening to your body and not getting any fatigue issues. Because I think less is more as I get older. It's not age, it's just training differently. How we used to train, 20 hours a week, and your off day is kind of just still working out. And I think I would perform better, and I do perform better running if I have more rest days in between. So training differently to stay healthy and not break your body down. That's kind of my fear, is that, as I become health coach and go to these nutrition and health coaching conferences, cardio is not good for us over 45 minutes. And, listening to Dan Plews and talking to Paul Larson is, all right, how can you train this off season and work on that lower heart rate training and I feel like more interval training is better for my body, and doing, all right, I'm going to run 4 minutes and walk a minute, or, not keep your heart rate up. And I've always done methadone training and heart rate training since 2001. But I find it interesting is how to approach racing again, training to improve your mitochondria function and improve your health in all your body systems. We have to approach it a little differently than we used to train. What do you think?
Yeah, I've mentioned a couple of times about the process and mastery of something. And as I've got older, we talk about training smarter, and people think that training smarter means buying a gadget and understanding how to use it and get the most out of it. But as you've mentioned there, as we get a bit older, and I'm a bit older than you are, Debbie, but I don't like to play the age card either. I think that smarter means how do we get more from less?
Yeah.
How do we train so we can do this event but live to fight another day, and we're not going to expire as we cross the finish line, because that's just all our body's good for anymore. I feel like I'm a reasonably good swimmer, but I feel like I've got so much more to develop on my swimming. I definitely can be a better runner, but not through more running, but doing more running drills, doing a lot more strength and conditioning, being much more sensible about how I run and being more consistent with my running. I've had a lot of calf and Achilles problems, and so mastering the process of running efficiently is something that I'm intrigued by now. Although I broke my toe on White Sands Beach, so
that's right.
You
said that. And there's a lot of those rocks there. I was afraid to swim in there because those waves will be huge, because that's where I was staying the first week and a half.
Yeah, well, one of the waves just dragged me onto the rock, and I just I was trying to get in without it, falling on the rocks, and a wave just dragged me in. Anyway, it'll be better in a couple of weeks. But Canada might be my retirement from Ironman, and so what I'm really interested in now is, can I nail the whole process of getting everything right? Can I pace my race without using any gadgets? So can I do it purely on feel? Can I do it using UCAN products and going on the low carb, high fat approach? Can I master the run so that I don't end up throwing up, because that hasn't happened very often? And can I get across the finish line feeling fantastic and recovering quicker, so that actually that process goes beyond the finish line? It means, can I walk properly the next day and not hobble around like I used to? And can I do all that without breaking myself in the process and ignoring my friends while I'm sort of so entrenched in this Ironman training that I just don't think about anything else? So there's, and if we are talking about age, I did that first race. I'll be 56 next year, so I was 31 when I did my first Ironman Canada. So actually, what is an interesting challenge for me is my first time there was 11 hours, 18 minutes and 21 seconds. And then my best there was 10:40, which was 1997. So can I go faster than that? I'm not interested in a PB, but can I beat those times when I'm 56? Which would prove actually to a lot of people that certainly up to your late 50s, age really isn't a factor if you're smart about what you do and look after yourself.
Yeah. And I think it's, training, as you're saying, is evolved, and learning how to do more intuitive training. And that will be a different approach to the race, as you've done in previous races. And I did the low carb stuff for years when I was racing, before it was a thing. And I did UCAN the last few years and did more fasted workouts. So it's just, I think everyone, it's just such N=1. Everyone always asks, what to do. And I think it's self-experimenting what works best for you that improve your performance and your recovery, so you feel better and bounce back faster.
Well, and that's got to be the thing. I can remember, in fact, the first Ironman Canada I did, I can remember that I stayed with a family that I'm connecting up with again next year, actually. So I've not seen them for a few years, which will be great. And another reason why I wanted to go back. And I stayed at their house. And on the morning I fully intended to go back down for the final hour, but we went home to their house first, and I had a shower, and I sat in the lazy boy and then fell asleep, and everybody had gone to bed. Then I woke up in the morning, and the two little boys were there, and mum and dad were downstairs, and the grandparents. So there was 8 or 9 people, and they were all waiting patiently for me to get up. And it was an open plan. It was an open plan house, and so my legs were so sore that I had to walk down the stairs backwards. They were all waiting at the table for me, with all these balloons, and they had all their friends around, and I felt so embarrassed. And it took me about 4 or 5 days before I could actually walk properly. So seeing if avoiding inflammatory foods and getting onto the right food straight after the race, not eating cake and pizza and eating the right stuff will be another interesting experiment, see whether that really does help speed up recovery.
Yes, for sure. Well, I just wanted to finish to have you kind of share any favorite moments at Ironman Hawaii this week or this year as you were there for 2 weeks. Anything you want to, any good experiences, stories you want to share as we wrap up today's call?
Well, obviously your low carb, high fat workshop, Debbie. Thank you for helping with that. No, it was good. And we had a spectacular location. If we could have just got those waves to be a bit quieter.
I know.
Pesky waves.
It's so loud.
But that was fantastic. And it was a small but engaged crowd. And Paul and Matt were great, weren't they? So, yeah, that was good. I enjoyed seeing one of the guys that I'd coached, Matt Lawrence. We've been working together for 12 years now. He came out to do the race, and his time was 10 hours 10. It wasn't near his best, but he was determined to enjoy the whole experience. And we chatted about how I did the race and everything. And Matt's a much better athlete than me, but he didn't just enjoy the race day. If anybody back home here in the UK that saw his Facebook pages remarked on how much enjoyment he was getting out of his little girl, going to see the turtles, seeing the dolphins, swimming in the bay there, swimming out to the coffee boat, going to the volcano. All of those things, he got so much enjoyment out of that whole experience for 2 weeks that and it was something he's had a lot of problems in his life and a lot of issues that he's had to overcome. So that was quite a special moment, to see him finally achieving that goal of getting there, but then enjoying the whole experience. And I think, other than that, seeing Jan Frodeno break that record, I think that time that he did on that day has far more of not wanting to dampen what Patrick Langer did last year, because he was the first man to go under 8 hours, but the conditions were far harder this year than they were last year. And so I think he only broke the record by 40 seconds, but I think we need to put that into perspective. Seeing Annie Haug and Lucy Charles, great performance, but just not able to run like Annie did.
That's crazy.
Interestingly, I spoke to Matt Back about this last week from UCAN. We were talking about Tim O'Donnell. He'd had quite a few months of disrupted running because he'd broken his foot. So his running was limited. Annie Haug had missed an awful lot of running. I think Ben Hoffman was another one. And yet those athletes all seem to perform well. And I think there's something, probably one lesson sorry?
Recovery time, sometimes. Well,
recovery time, but coming into a race like that a little underdone. Yeah. I've heard it before. I think Sebastian Keenly talked about it before, but I think there's a couple of lessons there about coming in underdone and actually performing well.
So many people are overtrained.
Yeah.
And which Ben Hoffman and a lot of people just raced this weekend. It was Ironman Florida. And something else. And Rainey did a half marathon or 70.3 triathlon and won her age group, or overall, not age group. But to me, it's interesting if they didn't do as well as they wanted to at Ironman Hawaii, how many of them are racing?
It seems like
2 weeks later.
Well, Joe Skipper beat Ben Hoffman. They both ran a sub 240 marathon. Joe ran a 239. He was 6th in Kona. Ben Hoffman ran a 236, I think, and he was 4th in Kona. Joe Skipper also did Ironman Wales at the beginning of September. So in inside 2 months, he's done 3. Ironman Wales is quite a tough course. He's done 3 tough Ironman races, and it does make me think about the recovery of these guys now. Whether an Ironman race really takes out as much from those guys as we think it does.
We'll see them later in life.
Well, or what troubles they're storing up for themselves.
Yeah.
Later on, who knows?
Well, thank you for your time today. And I love just talking shop with you, and hopefully come on the show again and kind of talk about our off-season training, how we're building up for next year. It'd be kind of fun to do as we make our comeback into enjoying the journey towards racing again and having a different perspective towards that reaching the finish line.
Well, that would be good, actually. We could reconvene, share our winter training experiences, talk about what we're doing differently to when we first did Ironman Canada.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be good.
Okay. All right, Simon, tell everyone where to find you, and if they want to listen to, of course, your podcast and your blog and coaching information, give them the lowdown.
Okay, so my website is simonwardtriathloncoach.com. I mostly hang out on Facebook. I share a lot of stuff on there. So my personal profile is simon.ward1. We have a Facebook page for triathletes. It's called The Triathlon Coach Cafe. It's free to join, but you do have to answer a few questions and ask me a question. So there's some information I can help you with learning. I have I'm on Twitter as at Triathlon Coach. I'm on Instagram as The Triathlon Coach. And my podcast is called the High Performance Human Podcast. And if you go I host it on Podbean. So it's simonward.podbean.com, I think. But I'll give you those to put in the show notes anyway.
Yeah, I'll put everything in the show notes, you guys. If you didn't catch that or need to just click on the link below in your show notes, that's the easiest way to go. So we'll put all that in there, and we'll talk to you in a few months, and enjoy your off-season base training, working on your running form drills and strength training.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Debbie. It's been great catching up, and enjoy the next few weeks. The remaining warm weather you've got in your autumn.
Warm weather. I'm in Seattle. It's like 50 degrees. So.
It's warmer than Yorkshire right now. It's dark and it is pouring with rain.
Oh, lovely. Okay. All right. I will let you go work out. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Whole Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at wholeathletepodcast.com. You can help us continue and grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and see you next time.